Welcome back to Sor Mind. This is a series where I'm investigating the music of Fernando Sor, not only from a technical standpoint, how to play the music, but also from the standpoint of his language harmonically and compositionally. And my hope is that studying this music, which is a lot to do with triads and some seventh chords, will serve as a great foundation and will help you in any style of music that you ultimately choose to play. In the last episode, I looked at Opus 44, number 1, and I looked at the first half. I decided to split it into 2 videos, and so this is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, take a look at that, and then this next video will make more sense. Again, the prerequisite, or the thing that you must know in order to really benefit from this video, is really quite simple. If you know the note names in first position and you can read them, then I think this video will be really useful for you and will be helpful because as I reference the note names and I talk about the harmony and the different compositional elements here, you'll be able to follow. If you don't understand first position, you don't know the note names and you can't read, I think it could still be beneficial for you. If you take your time and kind of go through this video slowly, then you will make strides towards understanding first position and knowing the note names. So where I left off in the last video was we were talking about how Sor in measure 15 breaks into this 2-part texture for the first time, and there's contrary motion. I talked about how I extract the voices, so that those were the 2 voices, the top and bottom voice from measures 15 to 16. I extract those voices so that I understand them. I use the same fingerings for both hands that I would use when I'm playing all the voices together. And we talked about how in beats 1 and 2, those notes combined create a C major harmony, basically. There's no fifth there. In measure 15, beat 3 and 4, those 2 pairs of notes, if we look at them vertically, little 2-note structures, dyads, if we combine those, that creates a G7 chord. So we have C major, or the 1 chord, then we have a 5 chord, and then back to the 1 chord. Now, as I mentioned, at this point we've reached the sort of midpoint of the composition. So the whole piece is 32 bars long, and that was just the end of bar 16. So the pickup to 17 takes us now into a little bit different journey. And as you'll see, if you kind of just look forward and scan the piece, you'll see that there's an F sharp coming up, and there's a little bit often in this style as the piece progresses, there's a little bit more chromaticism, or notes outside of the scale. Up to this point, the piece has been totally diatonic, meaning that it's all white notes on the piano, right? No sharps or flats involved at all. And it's almost miraculous, really, what these composers could do with just those 7 tones. They can create a real harmonic journey and a lot of forward pull in motion through the use of these harmonic progressions, and also things like the suspensions, the sort of tension, harmonic tension and release that we discussed in the first video on this piece. So we're going into bar 17. We're going into a little bit more murky harmonic waters. Let's just look at what's happening and kind of analyze it as we go. So what's interesting is the pickup to 17 is the note E, just like the way the piece begins. So you might be expecting, right? Just the same kind of theme of the piece in that first measure, that first statement. But instead, that pickup becomes is this? I had a student once who said, this doesn't sound like music, this just sounds like random notes, right? And it's funny how he really is using this implied polyphony or a sort of suggestion of multiple voices entering in and out. And it does not necessarily sound random, but it's not super singable either. It's hard to sing. So what is really maybe happening is a suggestion of, like I said, multiple voices. However, bar 17, if we look at all of those notes, we've got, let's go from low to high. The lowest note in that bar is G. Next note up would be B. We have a D, and we have a G. So really, it's just a G major triad. Chord tone melody is what I'll call it, or an arpeggio. Bar 17 again, let's play them in order. If I played it on the guitar like this, all right, do you know your bar chords? Do you know this big bar chord for G? Just play the top 4 notes. G, B, D, G. Now, the zigzaggy line continues, and in bar 18, take a listen. We might call that A minor. If it were A minor, it would be the flat third, the fifth, the root, and the flat third again. So take a listen to this. Here's the pickup to 17 and bar 18. First, I'll play it as written. And then I'll play it as block chords. When I'm analyzing music harmonically, I'll often do that because I want to know that the block chords, or my idea of the harmonic progression, is really close or reflective of the impression that the single line makes harmonically. So we could say that pickup to 17 then is almost like a suspension, a 6/5 suspension, going from E to G. The E is the 6th, it's resolving into the 5th of the G harmony. So if I play this, if I play G major, and I put the E in there for a moment. So why don't we play that pickup a little bit in that way of tension and release? We play, we could call it La Sol. I'm calling this Sol the 5th of G. That might be a little confusing. 6, 5. Okay, so let's play it correctly, Dan. Okay, where are we? 17. Now this is really cool. From 18, we thought it was A minor, but we could maybe say that it morphs into D7, and definitely by measure 19, we have a clear sense of D major harmony. The notes of measure 19, let's take what we call a pitch inventory, okay? We know we've got F sharp, we've got A, we've got D, we've got D. I'm playing them like this because I want to hear them all at the same time. That's a D major. That's a D major chord. Now, notice the F sharp. Why do we have an F sharp? Why is there a D major chord in the key of C major? I had mentioned in the first video on this piece that there were passages that we're part of the harmonized scale, where a triad is built on each scale degree. If we do that in C major, we could get something like this. Let's do it like this. If I play C major, do, mi, sol, then I play D minor, re, fa, la, and forgive my singing, but you know, mi, so, ti, mi, so, ti. Then we have, so we have C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, or part of a G7 chord. They function the same way often. And then C major. Now, why am I doing that? I could have stopped here. C major, C, G, D, F, not F sharp, A. Okay, in the key, the chord normally built on D is D minor. That's the 2 chord. That's part of the harmonized scale. That's the diatonic chord on the 2nd scale degree of C major. Why do we have D major with an F sharp in bar 19? This is called a secondary function. When I was in college, I had various textbooks, but one of them I think was by Bruce Benward. It's a great book, actually. I think it's still in publication. But I think, if I recall correctly, he called them secondary dominant, like a 5 chord. And secondary function is maybe a term that embraces like other types of chords that function in this way. But basically what's happening is the 5 chord of the key is G7, right? And we are playing the 5 chords 5. We're playing the 5 of 5. So C major, C is 1. C, E, G, that's our 1 chord. If we go up to the 5 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we play G major is our 5 chord. But check this out. If we play the 5 of 5, so let's start on G and count up 5. The 5 of G is D, and if we make it major, we have what is called a secondary function or secondary dominant. This is stuff that you could use Wikipedia. Actually, it's great. There's some good resources on there, or any kind of basic college level music theory book. The beginning books will include this this topic. Measure 19, D major. Now this note C on the downbeat of measure 20, this is the flat 7 of a D7 chord. Do you guys know your D7, basic D7 chord? The singer-songwriter D7. You don't see this that much in classical guitar music, but maybe if you play some Caruli or something, you'll see it. This note C is the flat 7 of D major. I'll give you a little story about how we get to D7. Play a D major chord. D, A, D, F sharp. Now take this D on the 2nd string, lower it 1 fret, you get this chord. D major 7. Has a C sharp in it. Lower the C sharp again to C natural. Now you have D7 or D dominant 7. So we could say that it's a D major triad with the added note, the flatted 7th, which is going to be 2 frets lower than the root of the chord, right? When I say root, it's important that you know the root of the chord is not always the lowest note. That's a point of confusion for some people. often it is. If the chord is in root position, then the lowest note will be the root. But the root does not mean the lowest sounding note necessarily, okay? And some chords, often in this tonal harmony, we will have duplicate notes. So if you play a basic D major chord, you actually have two roots, right? You have the lowest note in this case happens to be the root of the chord, the 1 of the chord. 5, 1, 3. So pretend we're in the key of D major. D is our 1. A would be the 5. We have another D, which is the 1 or the root, and F sharp, which is the 3rd. So here we have two roots, and we move this root down to C. That's a flatted 7th, and that's what creates that C dominant. Now, let's get back to the Sor piece for a moment. We're on measure 20, and we're looking at the downbeat, and we see the note C natural, okay? Now, this note could be interpreted as part of the harmony from the measure before. We could say that these sounds are all part of a D7 sound. And that we're going in measure 20, in beat 2, we're going to a G chord. So we have this kind of a sound. Let's say, right? D7 to G, secondary function, 5 of 5. We've cadenced on the 5 chord in measure 20. If we saw this in isolation, just measure 20, then I might say, well, we have a G major harmony, but that first note, C, again, is a 4-3 suspension. Take a listen. Sometimes I'm singing fixed do, and sometimes I'm singing movable do. Really, if we think in terms of just the piece as a totality in the key of C major, we would solfege it like this. Do, ti, do, ti. That's beats 1 and 2. Do, ti, so. And then that would be re, okay? But if we think of just this measure in isolation, it's a G major chord, and in beat 2, on beat 2, there's a 1 and a 3 of G major. Before that, we've got a 4. So we're getting into the weeds a little bit with the solfege stuff, but I think as this series progresses, I hope to make a lot more videos. And I'll try to incorporate solfege as much as I can. I think it's essential for really learning the language of music. So, okay, let me play for you measures 20 and 21. So take a listen. Carried away, I played that whole phrase. Let's go again from 20 slowly. So in measure 21, again, we have the very disjointed, implied polyphony, basically a G major chord, right? If we think in G major, this is the 3rd of the chord. This is measure 21. 3rd, root, 3rd, root. Now the ear is hearing this in the context of the previous measure. I'm gonna start on measure 20 and play 21 into 22. So 20 into the downbeat of 22, and hear this basically as G major, okay? Listen. Now, this is what we call a spread triad. The triad C major here. Again, going back to our friend, the basic C major chord. People call it cowboy chord sometimes. Notice that I'm skipping every other note. So in the chord itself, we've got 1, 3, 5, 1, 3. But what Sor is actually using is the 1, the 5, and the 3. So he's coming down, C major, then in measure 23, we're back to G major, with a few little non-chord tones. Even in the pickup to that measure 23, there's essentially C major, like 3, 1, swing low, sweet chariot, right? 3, 1, G major. Now, these two notes could be part of numerous chords in this key. We could say that they're part of the D7 again, the 5 of 5. We could say that they're part of an F chord or an A minor chord. But essentially, we're moving through a little bit of ambiguous harmonic territory there, departing a little bit from G major, the beginning of measure 23 established. And then when we get into measure 24, we're back to just G major. And this is 1, 5, 1 of G major. So again, we've cadenced on the 5 chord. The 5 chord, G, now kind of feels like home base. This is sometimes called a half cadence because it feels incomplete. And it sort of begs the question of when or how the resolution of the piece is going to be executed or brought to fruition. So measure 24, G, and then we're back to our familiar pattern here. We've got a pickup, and into measure 25, it's all C major coming down. Same as the beginning of the piece. Here's G7, still G7, resolving fa mi to the 3rd of C major, and then F major, G, A minor, let's say B diminished, then this is interesting. This is the first time we've seen this. There are 2 voices again, and they're kind of in contrary motion. I guess they are in contrary motion. And here he uses A and C. So this is really like an A minor over C, or you could call it a 6 chord, a C major chord with the 6 added. But the second half of measure 31 is definitely G7. So we basically have 1 with maybe with a 6 in it, G7, and then a 1. I'll play the last 2 measures. Now I'll try to play the whole piece for you. I'll play it slowly. color. So we get a little echo in the bass voice, Ti, do, and then later, take a listen. So there's even, it's subtle, you know, Sor's music, like the music of many of the classical period composers, the period that followed the Baroque and preceded the Romantic era, that language tends to be a little bit less contrapuntal, meaning that the idea of really independent melodic lines interacting together to create sort of a harmonic fabric, that is happening definitely in some of Sor's pieces. He even wrote some little fugues or fugettas, some short pieces that are more intensively contrapuntal and independent in the presentation of the melodic lines and the threads that combine to make the harmonic fabric, right? But I think it's true, generally speaking, composers were getting a little bit less interested perhaps in like really rigorous counterpoint that characterize the Baroque period, especially Bach. Nevertheless, it's good to keep an eye out, even in these more simple pieces and simple textures. It's a good thing to keep your eye out for some of that call and response. We might think, and I really think it's not true that this music is simple. It's certainly not like highly complex, but we don't want to underestimate it either. And I think if we can look for those little elements, like this little detail here, the bass voice, and then little imitative things, and as we discussed, like the contrary motion, how the two voices kind of come in at various places in the piece. If we can help the listener kind of feature those things in the way that we play so that the listener is drawn into the piece, then even a simple piece like this Opus 44 number 1 can be pretty sophisticated and actually pretty dramatic. In future installments of Sor Mind, I'll go into more of these techniques that he's using, and we'll review a lot too. But I hope you find this useful. Remember that the PDF of the piece itself is in the description, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy your music making generally. Have a great day. See you.